What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Ask A CISSP podcast. So this is a complimentary podcast to the other side of the firewall, where we talk about the latest and greatest in cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name is Ryan Williams. I cannot speak. So with me today is Allen Westley. He is a CSM, a CISSP. He holds an MBA, as well as he is a DE&I champion within the field. So I wanted you to kind of break down who you are, what brought you into cybersecurity, so your cybersecurity origin story, and then we can kind of talk about what you currently do. So without further ado, I'll give it to you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that, Ryan, and I appreciate you for bringing me on, giving me the opportunity to have this discussion. So yeah, my name is Allen Westley. I'm a director of cyber intelligence. Now I'm doing strategy as an individual contributor. So it's interesting moving between those two roles, but I've been doing that across three different across three different defense contractors for the past, I don't know, 15 years. And prior to that, I was an IT manager. So I worked with technology then at Boeing Company. And then, and that is actually where I ended up into cybersecurity. But going way back to talk about, my entire path is I've had lots of jobs, right? I've been a janitor when I was really, really young, just cleaning up cigarette ashes and cigarette butts in the sweatshops, the phone shops, call centers, all the way up through when I went into the military. Um, even as a ground pounder, so to speak, as a grunt, I ended up in the back of a PLL trailer controlling the whole computerized inventory of equipment that was deployed downrange, because I was the only one that knew how to use the laptop, or only one that had an interest in using the laptop.
Right.
So that became my role. So that's how I ended up, kind of working with computers. How I ended up on this role where I am now is, it's like you said when we were in the pre-recording here. It's a crooked road. Everybody's path is different. I when I was in high school, I thought I was going to be a musician, right? I studied music, played piano, vocal music. I thought I was going to be an entertainer, right? And I was going to school in Seattle, Washington at the time. And all of my friends who were in music and doing those types of things ended up in computers. Most of them started working over at Microsoft, obviously, in Seattle, where the headquarters is, and everyone else went off to different places. And everybody that I'm in touch with some of my alumni folks, and they're all working in computers, right? So it's there's a tie between music, I think, and
I was going to say that's pretty interesting. And so do you think it was proximity, or do you believe that there is a bridge between music and uh, infrastructure technology? Like maybe because of how much soundboards and lighting and things of that nature, like AV.
Yeah, I think there's a connection, right? I've learned about myself over time that one of the things that people were taking for granted for me, or just tapping into, and I didn't know it, they were just taking advantage of the fact that I don't like chaos, right? And so when I'm in a chaotic situation, I start looking for patterns, right? And I look for those patterns, and I take those patterns. This is repeatable, so let's make a process. So my chaos becomes, sanity. And so a lot of employees that I work for, they saw that, and even when I was working in a warehouse at Ace, I was working in a warehouse. Literally, Ryan, I was throwing totes onto pallets and sending over shipping and receiving. And then I actually went into the shipping office, and I looked around. We had just opened the place up. The office was brand new, and they were struggling with trying to figure out how to quantify how many totes they were stacking up and say, I, I went in there, I created an Excel spreadsheet, and I mirrored the whole docking system. And I was able to, we did a lot of barcode scanning, get it
Right.
automated, right? And so that got me off of the sort line, because they actually took that as a process, and they actually used it for several years after I left.
That's interesting. So you're already into automation and orchestration even back then,
Even
before
back
those things
then.
were, yeah, before those things were big, as they are now. So no, that's very interesting. So, and you did say something that I found interesting, like you said in the pre-recording, where you said you went from tanks to satellites to information technology. So can you kind of break down your path in the military?
Yeah, so when I was in the Army, like I said, I was a PLO clerk, prescribed load list clerk, and so it was my responsibility to keep inventory of all of the parts and equipment for the vehicles, the tracked vehicles that we were using downrange. And so that kind of spilled over into when I left the Army, I went into the Air Force Reserve, and I was trying to figure out which career field to go into. And they said, well, you could be a satellite operator. I'm like, what? I don't know anything about orbital mechanics. And so they took me and they put me into satellite operator training. And they pretty much jammed orbital mechanics into my head, fundamental stuff, right? Orbital planes and how many degrees they're inclined to each other, all of this stuff that I was completely oblivious to, but I actually took to it because fundamentally, a lot of the stuff that was happening in the background was done with Excel spreadsheets and doing command plans, so on and so forth. So they kind of stitched together.
Got you. Okay. And then your path kind of led you into I see that you're an adjunct professor as well. And then obviously you've been in the defense contracting space for some time now. So
Mhm.
obviously those steps from the military into the defense industrial base, it's not a far reach. And I see that you're doing big things in that space. So I would say what keeps you within defense contracting? What drives you to stay within this space? Because I have my own like I tried to get away from the military as far as possible, right? I just retired and I was like, you know what, I'm never going back. Like I enjoyed
Mhm.
it. It was a great part of my life. Spent over half my life in it. But I want to do something in the private sector. And then I went out
You didn't
there.
retire?
I did. I did my
Oh,
20
okay.
back in April. So
Okay.
20 years, 6 days.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for your
Thank
service.
you. I appreciate it. Same to you. But what I did miss when I was there, right? So like the corporate space is amazing. Like I met some really good mentors. I met some really good colleagues. I missed the mission. So is that kind
Mhm.
of what brings you uh
It
like
is.
or keeps you in orbit, so to speak, no pun intended,
Well,
within
it is. You're right. I mean, I got out of the military as a product of they kept chasing me for my weight, right? And I just felt like I didn't, I didn't want to keep having to pass the PT test all the time, right? So I didn't retire. I left before I left the Air Force before then. But to your point, mission was the thing, right? I wanted to see how can I still support a mission? How can I still contribute to the military aspect of things without actually being in the military. And defense contracting was a natural flow. They taught me how to do orbital mechanics. They taught me how to run ground control systems. I ran a team. Once I got out of the military, out of the service, I came on as a defense contractor, and I learned all about running an ops center, mission ops center. We did a primary mission ops center in Shreve Air Force Base before it became Shreve Space Force Base, and we had a backup in Vandenberg, and right, so we did transfer of operations. I had a huge team of about 50 people, consisting of managers and then technicians. ISSOs, we system administrators, we had data analysts, just a whole array of people. So I learned a lot. That was 8 years well spent in the Air Force GPS program.
no, that's awesome. Especially when it comes to kind of where our conversation is going to pivot when we go into the AI and the data management portion. But what I found interesting is GPS, right? So we kind of take it for granted. Uh, can you kind of break down like so I know of I think it's tick and tock. Like so I
Mhm.
know a little bit just from my networking experience, right? That's where we grabbed our timing from typically, right? So your NTP came from those systems. So can you kind of break down why that's so important?
Yeah,
The Air Force mission for it?
It is important because they call it a civil service, but it does a lot more than just civil service. There's different things on a payload, right? I found that out after I started working there. But way back in the day when I was in the Army, we used to have these pluggers, and these things were huge. They were just like bricks. This was our first GPS system. Like we have our phone now and tell us where to go.
Right.
These were purpose-built devices that you would find your positioning on. And I remember being in my track vehicle with my track commander above me, and we're trying to find our coordinates, right? And we had to have 4 satellites to be able to triangulate and find out where we were for positioning. And what I didn't know at the time was the satellites above and below the horizon, and how many you have above the horizon, and how much precision you can get depending on how many satellites you had in view. My track commander was telling me, Wesley, I'm losing GPS. Drive over the hill there. And so in the moment, I'm like, I'm driving, trying to get this signal. And then fast forward where I was a satellite operator and I have to understood how satellites and how GPS works. I was like, I could have drove all day and I would have never
Right.
no satellite view. But that's just the dynamic of being on the battlefield and then actually being behind the technology. And that's the thing I'm really passionate about, because what we do as defense contractors, there are people on the ground who don't understand the technology. They just need to have that service. They need to have that capability. They're not really concerned about how it works. And for me, that's a driver. I understand the importance of what we do.
No, absolutely. And I think a lot of people take it for granted, just SATCOM in general. So when I was stationed here in Florida, I worked for the Joint Communication Support Element. So we do a lot of tactical work with three-letter agencies, the task force, things of that nature. I'm a switch and router guy by trade, but they make you a broader communicator, right? Like you learn SATCOM, you learn radios, and yeah, SATCOM blew my mind. Like just the stuff we could do when it came to transporting data, and just trying to figure out like so we had Hawkeye Light 3s, we had 2.4s, things of that nature. Just learning how that worked. I got a pretty good um, appreciation for SATCOM operators and communicators throughout all the services, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, working with Harris and L3 and all that good stuff. So definitely like learning, like you said, how low orbit works. I was just like mind blown, right? So I'm just getting a taste of it. It's not my career. It's just I had to know enough to be able to set up the SATCOM communication equipment
Right, right.
to be able to transport, my data. So yeah, amazing stuff. So when it comes to your adjunct as a professor, what do you teach?
So I teach cybersecurity. And what's interesting is I teach cybersecurity to foreign students, most of them from India.
Okay,
And the classes are in person, right, in Orlando, and some of them are online. And what I find interesting about that is it teaches you a level of patience, right? Because English is not, the dialect is hard, their accent is hard to understand. But with some patience, it's not difficult, especially when you start talking about cybersecurity. You make it in terms of things that people can understand, right? For instance, the difference between, or the reason why I advocate for people, if you're working at an organization, especially if you're working at a defense organization, and you deal sometimes with classified information, to carry 2 devices, the one that the employer gives you and then your own. Because a lesson learned is, if you get a data spill and it gets on your personal device, and if the customer says it's severe enough,
right.
they have the authority to tell you to destroy that device. And I just made a choice. I said, I am not going to crush up my $1,200 phone. So I carry a work device. And so if something needs to be wiped, they can tell me, destroy it, or they can do a wipe on it, whatever they want to do. It's not mine. And I don't have any personal information on it.
Right. No, absolutely. So yeah, I've dealt with classified message spillage, right? CMS cases. You're like, yeah, we need to contact Yahoo and let them know.
Right, but making those, that's the thing when teaching, right, is making telling stories, number one, and number two is making it relatable, right, in real time. Asking things like, one of the things I find insightful is when I ask my students is how many apps do you have on your phone? And people, you can see the puzzle look on their face, and then some people 80, 90, 120. Yeah, it's possible to have over 100 apps on your phone. And the next question I ask is, how many of those privacy statements have you actually read when you were downloading
Oh,
those apps?
zero.
Zero. Yeah.
That's very true. Like, yeah, this calculator app wants to use your camera. You're like, wait a minute, what?
Why is it in my camera?
Makes no sense. But no, that's awesome. And yeah, I absolutely understand the aspect of patience. Like, so I did a little bit of teaching, but not to foreign students, right? It was to blue suitors, green suitors, um, uh, who
How was
were
that?
really good actually. So I did it in Turkey, right? So I worked for UMGC, and most of these students were trying to complete their CCAF. So it's a lot of intro classes. So I never really got to teach like not to say like it's not the good stuff. Like yes, every class is the good stuff, but I never was able to go past some of the intro classes because that's what they needed to pass their CCF, right? So I couldn't really
Mhm.
get into their bachelor's or master's courses, even though I was qualified for it. So the most I ever got was Sec Plus, Net Plus type boot camps, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But then when you have psychology majors, like not to knock that, my undergrad is psychology, my master's being a cyber, because I was thinking about pivoting and I didn't. I was like, you know what, I'm going to stay over here. um, but to see the light bulb go off, that was my favorite part. To see where you can, like you said, break something down and make it practical. And they're like, because they're always they seem intimidated by technology, but I'm like,
Mhm.
you have one of the world's smartest computers in your pocket. Like you have this, you get it. You just I don't feel comfortable or confident in yourself to have that swag when it comes to talking about networking and things of that nature. But once you get to the end of the course, you had like I said, psychology majors
Mhm.
or infantry guys and stuff like that, like able to break down signal flow. And you're like, yeah, you got it. Like you can do this. So that's awesome to see. We have that in common. I have not taught since I got back in the States. It's very hard to
It's hard. It is
get
hard.
back in. Yeah.
It's hard. Well, it's hard when you have a full-time job too, right? So I was
Yes.
teaching twice, 2 nights a week from 5 until 9 at night. And then, you have the day job on top of it. But in that case, you're doing it because you want to, not because I wasn't doing
Right.
it because I had to.
Right, right. Passion. So one day I'll go back into it. Right now I'm just trying to retire for a little bit, right? Do my
Yeah.
job, go, hang out with the kids. But yeah, one day I'm going to get back on the horse, so to speak. So when it comes to initiatives, so I also saw we had in common the DEI aspect of it. So we kind of started getting some conversation, but like I always tell people, I don't want to burn too much material when I have that conversation on the podcast. So when I initially started the podcast was during COVID. So
Mhm.
I was going crazy, right? I just arrived in Turkey like at the first year, like 2020 of COVID, and they were more locked down than states were,
Right.
surprisingly, or not surprisingly, depending upon your perspective. So it was like go to your hotel room, do not pass go. You're going to be here for 2 weeks. Go straight from the PAX terminal
Wow.
to your hotel room. Someone will bring you food, hopefully, which they did.
Like, that's
So
like
that,
prison.
yeah, basically. So that's when I started. I had the idea in my head to do the podcast. I said, well, I have nothing but time to research and to start it. And then during that time, I was very intrigued with the transition, right? I'm not sure if I'm going to get out the military or not. I have another 2.5 years. And when I talked to my coworkers, a lot of them were saying like, hey, in the military, it is a melting pot, believe it or not. When you come out here, it is not that. Is very one type of person here in cyber and IT. And that kind of lit the flame, right? Like, okay, I want to build my network. I want to make it as big as possible. I want to help other people in this transition as well. Because I didn't know how good I had it, right? Because especially being joint uh, when I was with the joint communication support element, you had people from all walks of life, all services, all races, everything.
Mhm.
And then to find out that it's not the case on the outside, where the stats were, we only make up 7% of cybersecurity, right? We only have like 2 or 3% who are in those senior and senior suite positions.
Mhm.
Is just a very small group of people. Um, So, hey, I need to branch out. I need to do this. And I saw a lot of other people were starting to start that initiative as well. So it's good to see that you still have that initiative. It's good to still see people are still doing it, because what I found after the pandemic was a lot of that was going flat. It was like, hey, we need to make these record-making profits, and this is something we need to cut, and that's very disheartening. So
Mhm.
again, thank you for being a DEI champion, because there's not many of us able to do that right now, especially in this climate.
Yeah, you're right. I'm the former chair for what we called at Elder Harris Employees of African Descent. I did a 2 year stint as the chair. I just transitioned out of it the beginning of this year. We have a new chair. But when I was in there for those 2 years, that was, mentoring and you never know, Ryan, how people view you or when they're watching you. I mean, literally, I would be traveling through the airport. Not that I'm famous, but you pass people, right? And they've been on a call that you were on, and there's like 100 people on the call, and you were giving some kind of a talk as a chair, and then they see you, and you're I'm like, I had to stop. I'm like, am I dressed okay? Did I say something? Did they hear me say something bad? Because you start thinking about
Right,
that, right? But the other side of that is even if you don't want to be, you become a role model. I'm sure you see the same thing, right?
right,
And mentoring folks, right? I absolutely believe in mentoring, especially our young men. I was at the NSBE conference, and there was a gentleman walking by. He was that's the National Society of Black Engineers, um, and he was going to one of the briefings, and he had a suit on, right? And he was about, I guess, 20 years old, 20 years old. And when you buy a suit, Ryan, a men's suit, and you have it double vented and it's stitched down, you're
right,
supposed to take the threads out. And so, I told him I wasn't, I didn't pull him aside. It was very discreet. And I says, you might want to take those out, right? Because those are the little moments, right? And if you take that suit and go into an interview, people are going to make impressions, right? You're walking away and they're like, well, why does he still have the stitches in the back of it?
right,
It's just the small things, right? And he was very appreciative of it, right? He said, I didn't know that, just small things, but mentoring, being a DE&I champion, it means a lot in terms of saying things and bringing things forward from the members at large, from lead that needs to go up the chain. Because I sat on the DE&I council with our CEO, Mr. Chris Kabasic, and he was very much an advocate, proponent for what we were doing. And if we wanted to change something, we want to fly a flag for Juneteenth, we do that. We want to have different events, professional development. We want to talk to the board member. We can get a board member onto our Zoom and have them speak to our members at large. So L3 Harris does a lot in the wake of all the noise that's happening down here in Florida with critical race theory and burning books and
right.
things that they're doing here, that almost seems like we're moving backwards. So much so I had to go and ask our talent and acquisition VP, what's our position as an organization with all of this stuff that's going on when it comes to DEI? Are we rolling back because, there is, what do you call it? Assistance, right, for education, right? They roll that back, right? And so you ask those questions. What's happening, and are we still committed to the cause of DE and I, right? And the answer obviously is yes at the corporate level. But the questions I'm getting from the members at large are, can I move to Florida? Is it safe for me? Because we had members all over the U.S., right?
Right.
For lead, and as their positions change, I had a gentleman ask me. He says, "I'm thinking about coming from Utah and bringing my family here, and is it safe? I mean, I hear all the stuff on the news, and you have to kind of dispel all of this." I'm like, yeah, there's plenty of Black people living in Florida, and nobody's, they're doing okay, they're doing fine. So there's a lot of that.
No, no, that's good. That's an interesting perspective. So I'm here in Florida as well. So I'm in the Wesley Chapel, so outside of Tampa. Um, because this was my last stateside duty station, and we really did really enjoy it here. Aside from the giant flag, but
Mhm.
that's closer to me than it is to you. Um, But with that being said, so I think that's a very good segue into the AI conversation,
Okay.
because there's a lot of ethical ramifications and just talk amongst communities because of the impacts AI can have on groups because of who may be working on it, right? So AI bias, ethics, things of that nature. One of the first stories we did was on Dr. Gabriel from Google and kind of the fallout that she had with them when it came to the ethics of AI and how she didn't feel comfortable with where it was going, right? Um, since then, I believe she started her own company. She's championed a bunch of initiatives as well to try to get the right people in the room when it comes to building these large language models and things of that nature, generative AI. But when we were conversating via LinkedIn, you said you wanted to talk about AI as
Mhm.
well as data in general. So I kind of want to go into that conversation because I believe obviously it's the future, right? Like everybody's using Copilot or Bing or um,
Mhm.
uh, Ch Chat GPT or what have you. There's numerous AI tools. I've also seen a lot of companies are scared, right? They want to,
Mhm.
how do we protect ourselves? How do we? I drummed up a memorandum of understanding, right? Let's trying to take baby steps like crawl, walk, run. You don't have AI policy yet, but here's some things you may want to put into a memorandum just so people don't feed
Mhm.
the large language model your PII and things of that nature, right? So like just kind of talk us through what you're doing in that space and kind of your thoughts.
So that's interesting, Ryan, because I'm a tech junkie, right? Number one, I'm an early adopter. Number two, I like to try new technology, which is kind of strange because I'm 57 years old. I say that on on this recording, but I've been dealing with technology a long time, and my ethos is you can't hide from technology, right? You cannot hide in a bunker and think that you're safe, right? If you're living in this world, right, in our society, you are partaking in the technology. You have to. There's cameras everywhere, right? You can't drink from a water without a fountain without getting your mouth wet, right? So you can't say I'm going to take all the good things from technology and I'm going to hide myself so I'm not impacted by it. That's just impossible. So what I say is embrace it, and I'll actually talk about teaching. I right when I was teaching my second class, that's when the whole ChatGPT thing broke loose, and all of the administrators, a lot of the administrators where I was teaching, they were like concerned. They're like, "What if my students start using that to write their papers?" I'm like, "Good, good. Create some framework for them while they're using it. There's nothing wrong with. I use ChatGPT all the time, and I like what you said when you said there are other large language models because every browser like Opera, I don't know if you use Opera, they have a large language model called Aria, right?
Okay.
Bing, Anthropic, there's just tons of them,
Right.
right? So organizations thinking that they can start shutting off ports to different things so their employees
Right.
can't get to it, I'm like, that's a challenge. I mean, that's just, they're going to find a way. One of the things I liked about L3Harris was the fact that they took the approach of not blocking it, right? They put up a warning banner, like when you go to ChatGPT, when it first burst onto the scene. The first thing that L3Harris did was our CIO shop said, let's put a banner up around it and tell you what the parameters are, right? You click that button that says, I understand these guidelines, kind of like a acceptable use blurb that pops
Right.
up. And then you go, and it says in there, don't put company proprietary information in there, don't put PII in there, do not put any information into this large language model. This was way back in, like way back, right? But in the beginning of January of last year, right, when it burst onto the scene. And fast forward till today, and now we have our own custom in-house large language model.
Oh,
We
that's very
call it,
interesting. Right.
we call it LHX GPT, and it's trained on our company information, but it's not on the open internet, right? So it's internal. So I think people see the value in this, and I absolutely do. I mean, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see I have a virtual avatar. My voice has been cloned. I I can do literally 10 to 20 recordings. All I'm doing is writing in a script. I feed it into HeyGen. HeyGen post processes it, and outside the other end comes a full production video, and it looks just like me. Like I'm standing here talking to you right now. That's how my avatar looks because it's me. It's just been recorded and processed, and so now I have this template that I can just write scripts. I write the script, and then I can use their public avatars to weave in with my own, and I can have a team of people talking about a topic. You know, it obviously they can't talk together, but you can hand off from
Right.
one scene to the next scene and then do a closing on it. And it's a tremendous tool for learning. I do learning videos for my Cyber Explorer um, uh, LLC that I run now, and it's like I got all of these employees I don't have to pay for.
Right. No, that is very interesting. Like from wow. Like so that gives me a bunch of different questions I want to ask, but I don't know if I want the answers to. So I'm still taking baby steps, right? Because I am hyper vigilant when it comes to it. Like I notice the future, and I'm very excited about the implications, especially when it comes to um, just working smarter. However, my fear is leaning too fast. So what I've been currently doing is I will do assistance. I'll write it all up, and then I'll feed it the bits of information, right? I'll sanitize it, I'll feed it to it, and I want to see, give me a different perspective on this. Give me, as though I'm talking to this type of audience, or give me a more critical, concise approach to this. Here's 3 paragraphs, and that is why I've stopped. I have not gone past that just yet. So
That's
it's
how
more
you're
of
supposed to.
assistance than generation.
But that's how
But
you're supposed to use it, right? And I think a lot of people get confused with that, right? I think they think it's gonna, it's a genie, right? I ask it a question, it gives me a magic answer. I use it for ideation. I'll take things and I'll walk through it. I said, oh, well, I have a premise for an article, and I want the article to be about this. Go out and do some research and get me some substantial references that support my premise. And then, there's a whole back and forth because I wrote years before ChatGPT ever happened. I was writing articles, right? So I come from a background of having a writing process, and I know the importance of how words matter and how words can be used to evoke emotions, right? And so I use all of that. Plus, we had English lit when we were in college, both of us, so we
right,
know how language works, right? And the importance of words. And so when I'm sitting down using that tool, I'm using that tool not as a person, looking to give me all the answers. I want to have a dialogue. I want to do some ideation. I want to test my premise. I want to test my theory. I want to test the tone. I want to have it, written in a way. If my audience is technical, I want it written technical. If my audience is
right.
not technical, I want it more relatable. And those are the types of things that you can put into a prompt, and you get more productive output that way than if you just type a one liner and then you get mad because I see people online all the time. Chat GPT is dumb. It's garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
If you take your time and you actually use it as a collaborator as opposed to just a vending machine. You put 2 nickels in and pull the handle and get your candy bar. It's not like that.
No, that's very, very well said, actually. So yeah, so I guess my process is okay.
Oh yeah,
That's where I'm
you're
currently at with it.
absolutely. You need more
Yeah.
people need to think about it like you do, Ryan. It's like, I want to sit down and think about this and do some critical thinking as I'm having these interactions and not just trying to, get something for nothing.
No, absolutely. And that's why I didn't fear it when because I was transitioning back to the States as it was starting to become more of a academic um challenge, right? Where teachers were, afraid that they're going to get generated papers and what have you. So I didn't have to deal with that, luckily. But again, like you said, garbage in, garbage out. Like you can tell if it's not a person, especially if you've been with that person for an entire term. You can tell, like, hey, I've read your stuff. Like, this is not in your voice. Like this is
Right. That is a good point. And what I did as an experiment, Ryan, is I went back 14 years ago when I was writing. And I grabbed up all my articles that I had written before ChatGPT. I put them into PDFs, and I fed all those PDFs into ChatGPT, and I said, assess my writing style. Tell me what my weak points are. Tell me what my voice is. And
Mhm.
you'd be amazed at the output that you get back. Valuable output, right? Some of it validates that you think you're with the bee's knees and you were really good. Some of it says, well, now you weren't so good. Your vocabulary needed some work. It stank over here. You could use some. And I get new words that I hadn't used before. And so I use it in a as a research partner, as a ideation partner where I can
Right, like
bounce
an
ideas
actual
off.
assistant as opposed to,
Yeah,
yeah.
assistant. That's the word. Yeah, I'm saying all these words to say assistant. Yeah.
No, it's great. No, yeah, we're on the same page. No, I think that's a very interesting perspective. When it comes to data, so I know you wanted to talk about that as well. So is it from the perspective of management, or like what's our journey right now when it comes to data?
I think people are starting to come to grips with data is the core value uh, of their business, right? It used to be, I make widgets. Well, if you don't have data, you can't make widgets, right? Data is, that's how you're defining the widget you want to build, right? And what's your critical information, right? And a lot of organizations these days are wrangling with what is my critical information. And then when you start looking at the rabbit hole of, remember when I told you about how many people read their privacy statements? I actually put a privacy statement into ChatGPT and I said, assess this. And I said, is it good for the user or is it good for the manufacturer, right? What are the clauses in here that protect me? And one of the interesting things I found out about it is that, a lot of these privacy statements they go off to third and fourth party people, and they hand off the responsibility 3 and 4 layers deep. And so while you think that, this particular vendor for this piece of software is the person, that they're the entity that's responsible, when you start looking at data provenance, right? There are like 3 or 4 layers down that you don't know about. So if something bad happens, right, everybody can pass the buck and they just keep
Mhm.
passing the buck and nobody owns the responsibility. So when I talk about data, I talk about data inside of an organization, knowing what is your core data, knowing who your third party entities are, and knowing how they're protecting the data and what their privacy statements are. And if you have to go 3 or 4 layers deep, if your business is that critical, or what you're dealing, or the data that you're getting from those sources is that critical, you need to be that detailed. And so you need to have some legal eyes involved for privacy and for litigation and for liability. And then you need to have your engineers and program managers and your data analysts. It just, you know, cybersecurity and data are inextricable, and having those two things as functioning parts of the entire organization is just imperative. It's just not. It's not. It's not something that you can not do anymore, right? You
Right.
can't
And
say that that's IT's problem.
you're right, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail right on the head, especially when it comes to vendor management. Because the government's not playing around anymore. Like when we talk about CMMC 2.0 and things of that nature, you're going to have your feet held to the fire. Like, are you protecting people's PII? Are you protecting the government's classified information? Are you
That's
protecting the
bomb.
vendor classified information, UCI, and all that other good stuff? So those things are starting to obviously roll up more on the federal side, where they're trying to basically hold you accountable. And then with the SEC now holding CISOs accountable, even though there's still a lot of argument should a CISO have a seat at the table or not, but they're showing up to all the court dates. So that in
Well, that's what
itself
I'm
shows that
saying.
just
Should
wait.
I have a seat at the table?
Right,
But if I'm caught up short, you can certainly fire me. I'm
right,
like,
right,
ah,
exactly.
okay.
Like, you can't have your cake eat it too. You can't say like, no, I don't have leverage when it comes to the conversation yet. I'll be the one who's going to have to show up um, to trial. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to unpack there. when it comes to, like you said, data, critical data, and then vendor management. Again, I don't read the always like so I peruse, but I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I can't read 90 user agreements. Like the only ones I've read are the ones
Oh,
I wrote.
right, right, right. I just found this interesting website. A gentleman stood it up. I forget his name. I forget his name, but he sent me the link. And what it is that it is a database that he's built that's tied to the SEC's disclosure. Because every
Okay.
time the new rule dropped last year in December, and it's in effect now for disclosure, you have like 4 days to disclose. Microsoft just got caught up in a big thing with Blizzard, um, and now I just found out it was released today that another organization just got caught up by the same threat actor, nation state actor.
Mm,
So, but these are real time disclosures now. I mean, this literally it happened today, and it made it onto this. It made it onto the website because 8Ks are publicly accessible. This isn't information that's hidden. You can go out to the SEC site and you can go look up your organizations if you're publicly traded. You can look up your organization and you can look for the 10K and the 8K reports. The 8K is where all the disclosure happens now. And so people are actually
got
paying
it.
attention to that.
No, that's I mean that's good. It's good that it's happening much faster. The adoption of it is much faster than I expected. I was like, no, that the people are gonna drag their feet. The SEC is gonna have to take a lot of people to court. That doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, that's good
The
news.
only
Uh,
danger with that, though, Ryan, is that you've been doing this for 20
yeah,
some years. You know, when a cyber attack happens or ransomware happens, the story is never as good the second time around as it
right,
is, or the first time around. And they run in and they say, "Oh, I had this breach," and maybe it's not that bad, maybe it's worse, right? You don't know until you
right. Until you
have a chance. Like,
assess.
yeah, they've done the
Yeah.
investigation, so
So yes, it is a double-edged sword. So yeah, I'm not looking at it from the perspective. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of a citizen or a client, not as the CERT team, because there's nothing but
right,
alarms
yeah.
and screaming happening. So yeah, or the PA team, right? As
Mhm.
well. Like there's it's rolling downhill at that point. So that is very interesting as well. So I do have the luxury of not having to be in that seat. So yeah. So
Yeah.
for those who are listening, they're probably like yelling at their radio. Like it's too fast. So I get
Yeah.
it from both directions. But no, that's very interesting. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the question. So because you're a wealth of knowledge, this has been a really good conversation. So I definitely have to have you back on the show. Um, what have I not asked you? Like because you've been on a few different podcasts. Like you said offline, you're becoming a seasoned pro over here, right? So gonna book you before you get too busy. But what
Uh,
have you what have you not been asked or you're like, man, I wish somebody would ask me this question?
what do I do for fun and what do I like?
Okay.
And Godzilla movies, man. Man,
Okay.
I will hurt somebody to go see a Godzilla movie. I don't know. I'm amazed at how Godzilla can tear up Japan and then put it all back together in a week
Right.
and start over. Because I used to watch it when I was growing up, black and white with my mom, and I was like, "Oh my God, they rebuilt Japan. He's gonna tear it up again." It's like Tokyo is gonna tear it up. But yeah, I just
Okay.
love Godzilla movies.
No, that's awesome. So have you seen Minus One? Because I haven't seen it yet.
I have seen it, yes, and it was
Okay.
all dubbed. And you would think that because you have to read the bottom of the screen, you wouldn't enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoyed it because the way that the director and producer did it, you could enjoy this. You could enjoy the special effects, right? But you can still follow the story.
Okay.
It was just done really, really well. And then, wow, Godzilla. I don't know if you've seen. You had said you haven't seen it yet, so I won't
I have not seen it yet. I see it's up for awards. It's like the first Godzilla movie to be up for like either Oscar or something like that. Like
It's
that's
really
crazy.
good.
Okay,
It's really
so
good.
I have to check it out because I just started Monarch, so I'm watching that.
I was
Um,
disappointed by Monarch because
it's
they
kind
haven't.
of boring.
I've watched like I've seen 3 episodes and I haven't seen a monster. Come on.
Yeah, so that's where I stopped at. So that's exactly where I'm at. I just saw what a kaiju like for the first
Mhm.
time. It was tearing up. It was kind of cool. It was tearing up something they were inside of, so they were trying to escape it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, I don't know if I could do. three more episodes before I see another one though.
I
Like,
know, right?
how do you make this boring? Like, I hear it gets good though. I do hear it gets good, so
It's
I'll probably
gotten
jump back
better. The
into it.
storyline gets better. Once I've decided that I'm not going to see a monster every 5 minutes, and I'm actually
Right.
have to buckle down and listen to the story, then it got better.
Okay. Okay. I have to jump back into it because I'm like, man, this should be right up my alley, but I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, so aside from Godzilla movies, any books, any TV shows, anything that's caught your attention recently?
So one book that, if I want to be high-minded, because I'm really when I'm at the movies, I'm really shallow. I just want to be entertained. But if
Right.
I'm being high-minded, I would say The Power of Giving Away Power is a
Okay.
very, very good book. I wish I would have brought it over here. I don't want to step away because then I'll break the background. But maybe next time, if you have me on again, I'll show you that book. And what's unique about that book is that it talks about moving away from the pyramid type of hierarchy inside of organizations and more into a constellation of leadership where you
Okay.
have enough room in your leadership circle where you can grow it and expand it with diverse ideas, as opposed to having this pyramid where the closer you get to the top, the less room there is, and now you have this group think, and so it's a very interesting book because it advocates for inclusivity and diversity in thought, cognitive diversity, and a lot of other good antidotes and ways of thinking about leadership are in that book. So if you have me on again, I'll have that book.
Gotcha. I will definitely have you back on. Like, yeah, no, you've been a great guest. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of there's lot of rabbit holes we can go down, but I think this is a really good conversation, especially for the first time. I always tell people I don't like to do a lot of research on the person before I meet with them, which is kind of counterintuitive to quote unquote journalism, but I'm not a journalist, so I would like
Well,
to
you don't know
absorb the
if you're going
information.
to do all that digging and it's somebody you don't want to have back on your show.
Well, yeah, I'd like to absorb the information like the audience absorbs it so I can ask those questions that they may also be interested in. But yeah, I'll never be mistaken for a journalist because I come in very flat-footed. But the good thing, like you say, recorded, right? Like you do a lot of your stuff recorded. The good thing about recording is if you were crazy, I'd be like, well, that was an interesting 45 minutes
Right,
that I
right.
can't air.
You won't get it back, but yeah.
Right. Well, no, it's been a pleasure. Definitely have to get you back on. Um, I'll plug the show real quick. So we are back Monday through Friday. So Monday, Tuesday are topics, Wednesday discussion, Thursdays Ask A CISSP. So this one will go live not this Thursday, but the next Thursday. But continuity wise, the audience does not know which Thursday is which. And then Fridays are everything else, so movies, books, games, all that good stuff. Um, so. Uh, you can find us at the websites that go by our name. You can hit me up at RyRy Security Guy. That's RYRY Security Guy. You can find me on LinkedIn, Clubhouse, Twitter, and Threads. And you, Alan, where can people find you?
Oh, yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. I write a lot on Medium. I'm on Substack, and I'm on LinkedIn newsletter. So you can look me up, Allen Westley, ALLEN WESTLEY. And you can find me at Cyber Explorer as well. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And I'll grab all those links from you, and those will be in the description. So if people did not catch it, they can also click on it. So that's what we'll go for. But yeah, definitely continue to tune in throughout the week. We'll continue to roll the show. We're still in season two. We'll probably break and do season three fairly shortly. Um, keeping on and stay safe, stay secure.
Ryan, thank you for having me on the show. I had a blast, and I look forward to if you have me on again. Looking forward to it. You take care.
Absolutely. Take care.